Welcome back. You must be tired. Come on in.
Thanks.
When my husband and I arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, she only invited my husband inside. As I tried to enter, she glared at me and said,
"You're not needed here."
She slammed the door shut. What? I was completely taken aback. I gently opened the door, only to find my mother-in-law glaring at me with fury.
"I heard about it. Your parents are in debt, aren't they? We don't need a wife like that."
With that, she slammed the door again. I stood there, bags in hand, stunned. From inside, I could hear my husband and mother-in-law laughing and having a good time. I realized I didn't need to endure this kind of treatment just to be at my in-laws' house, so I quickly left. My name is Nancy. I'm a 32-year-old doctor working at the hospital my parents founded. I met my husband John when he was admitted to our hospital after an injury. He's charming, friendly, and a great conversationalist. Even though he's 5 years younger, he seemed mature and dependable. We got married after a year of dating. He works as a vice president at the company his father runs. Mother-in-law also worked as an office worker at father-in-law's company. Both his parents were thrilled when we got married.
Your parents run a big hospital and now a doctor is becoming our son's wife? It's like a dream. We're so glad to have you, Nancy.
My mother-in-law used to be so kind to me. Every year, during Christmas and other long holidays, we would visit my in-laws' house. They always welcomed us warmly. I would bring delicious food and drinks as gifts, which they would use for New Year's celebration. My mother-in-law would take the lead in cooking, and even though I would offer to help, she would decline.
"Nancy, you work hard as a doctor. Just relax."
Your family. Don't feel like you have to do anything.
My husband would add. I always looked forward to these visits, but today was different, especially my mother-in-law. She looked at me as if I were an enemy, her gaze cold and piercing, almost like a vampire. This was the first time I had experienced such coldness from them. Death at my parents' house? I had never heard of such a thing. I have a younger brother, 2 years my junior, who's also a doctor. We both work at our family's hospital. Recently, my father called me for a discussion about his health, but there was no mention of any debt. Driving home, I remembered a conversation with my husband from a week ago. Both of us have busy jobs, but that day, we happened to come home at the same time. My dad's retiring from being a doctor. He says his eyesight isn't what it used to be, especially for surgery. So they have decided to close the hospital. My husband looked shocked and exclaimed,
What? The hospital's closing? Do they have debts or something?
I'm not sure about debts, but they're planning to sell the hospital property.
So you won't be working at the hospital anymore?
I'll be taking a break for a while, but before I could finish, I received an emergency call from the hospital and had to leave immediately. We'll continue this later. I had said that, but there was hardly any time for it. Afterwards, my husband claimed he was busy at work and came home late. With my night shifts, we hardly spoke. I'm sure he exaggerated our conversation, thinking my parents' hospital had closed due to debts, and that I was involved in paying them off. He must have told his parents that. Still, the cold treatment from my mother-in-law was unbelievable. Lost in these thoughts, I was heading home when I heard phone ringing from my bag. Locked out by my mother-in-law, I had driven off with my husband's belongings still in the car. His phone was in the bag, ringing non-stop. I had never looked at his phone before, but thinking it might be urgent, I decided to check. I pulled over, took out his phone, and tried a few passwords. Knowing my husband's aversion to complications, I figured it wouldn't be too complex, as I thought it unlocked with his birthday. The caller was a woman named Susan, a name I hadn't heard before. Checking the history, there were numerous exchanges with Susan. The messages were shocking.
I want to see you soon.
I wish I could be with Susan forever. I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays. I'll miss you. Once I get the money, I plan to leave her.
Really? That makes me happy.
I love Susan the most.
It seemed my husband had been cheating on me. I had thought of my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law as kind-hearted. I was the only one. Back home, I couldn't shake off the contents of his phone. I went into his study, looking for more evidence. Opening a drawer, I found photos of him with an unfamiliar woman apparently from a trip and hotel receipts. There were other shocking discoveries. Unable to come to terms, I decided to visit my parents' house. When I rang the doorbell, my mother, surprised, opened the door. "Why are you here so late? You look pale. Are you okay?" Seeing her caring face, tears streamed down. Noticing my state, she wrapped me in a blanket. My father, sensing something was wrong, asked,
What happened?
I told them about the in-laws and the affair. My mother was shocked and my father was furious.
It's so terrible.
Ungrateful people.
Turns out, my husband's family business wasn't doing well. They often approached my father for financial help, which he provided, thinking of me.
Maybe you should play along for a while and see their true colors.
My father suggested. It seemed intriguing at the time. The next day, I returned to my in-laws' house and shouted at the entrance,
I'm sorry for being an immature wife. Please let me in.
I brought various gourmet ingredients and fine wine as gifts, finally gaining entry into the house. My mother-in-law, seeing the luxurious gifts, marked greedily. Behind her, my father-in-law and husband gave me cold stares.
We only treated you well because we thought you were the daughter of a prestigious hospital. Now that we know your family's hospital is drowning in debt, you'll work hard as a wife.
I understand. From then on, the harassment towards me was relentless.
Come on, start cooking.
She kicked me towards the kitchen. Using the ingredients I brought, I prepared dishes and served them. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband eagerly began eating.
Hey, we are out of wine. Bring the next bottle. You're so inattentive.
Is this all you cooked? You might be a smart doctor, but you're a terrible housewife.
Despite their complaints, they finished every dish. When they were done and I tried to eat, my mother-in-law slapped my hand, causing my fork to drop.
What are you doing sitting? You think you're eating with us? Housekeepers eat leftovers in the kitchen.
So I'm a housekeeper now?
How dare you talk back with all your family's dead?
John, do you feel the same way?
I never liked your arrogant attitude, Nancy. I tolerated it because I thought your family was wealthy. Listen to Mom. I'll keep you around as a housekeeper.
Hearing my husband's true feelings, I was stunned. I had hoped he was just going along with his parents, but that hope was shattered. He had married me for my family's supposed wealth and had been pretending all along. I realized that my husband's current behavior was his true nature. I ended up eating leftovers in the cold kitchen and was left with a mountain of dishes.
Save water and wash with cold.
Quite a terrible story. In the freezing winter, washing dishes with icy water was cruel. It was so cold that my whole body trembled. And for sleep, my mother-in-law pointed to a shed with no heating or bed. Where is the bed?
What? You think you're getting a bed? There are old towels and cardboard in the shed. Make do.
I understood their true nature. Thankfully, I had recorded their abusive words. I had no more business in this house. That night, in the freezing shed, anger towards my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband kept me warm. I'll never forgive them. Late at night, after they drunkenly passed out, I drove back to my parents' house. After a good night's sleep, as I was packing the next morning, the door burst open. My mother-in-law and husband stormed in.
You think you can just leave without making breakfast?
What's the meaning of leaving your husband behind?
Their contemptuous looks were terrifying. It seemed my father-in-law was at work, but my husband and mother-in-law had come to berate me further. I am done with both of you.
You dare talk back to your mother-in-law and husband? You're even worse than I thought.
We can divorce if you want, but if you initiate it, you will pay compensation.
Maybe you can sell the hospital's land. It should fetch a good price. We'll take that.
That's a good idea. I said it sarcastically, but my husband just smirked, thinking he had the upper hand. Then he threw a paper at me. It was a pre-filled divorce application.
If you don't do as I say, I'll use this.
Good. This clears things up for me.
What?
You thought I would beg you not to leave?
You, with a bankrupt hospital and drowning in debt, have no choice but to cling to me, right?
He was completely mistaken. While it's true my father retired and closed the current hospital, we plan to relocate to a new facility near the train station. My brother and I would work there with me as the director. Far from being in debt, we had more than enough assets. Upon hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law turned pale.
That's a lie, right?
You deceived me?
I tried to explain, but you didn't listen and jumped to conclusions.
So your family is still wealthy? Then what I did was...
My mother-in-law mumbled, panicking.
Can we forget everything that happened yesterday and today? We have always been on good terms, right?
After all the insults, she now wanted to forget everything? It was laughable. I'm shocked that you have spewed such terrible abuse at me and asked me to forget everything. Remember, I'm just the housekeeper, right?
No, that was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, please let it go.
It's too late. I know your true feelings. By the way, my father will be taking back the $100,000 he loaned to your company.
What? How did you know about that? We don't have that money.
My husband started to panic, realizing the gravity of his mistake.
Nancy, I'm sorry. I should have defended you from Mom. I promise to protect you from now on.
You mean protect Susan, right?
How did you know about Susan?
You were cheating while pretending to work late. I have all the evidence. I showed him the photos and email exchanges on my phone. He stared at the evidence, sweating profusely. You will be the one paying compensation.
Susan was just a fling. I met her at a bar. I'll break up with her. Please forgive me.
He began to apologize, looking pitiful. While apologizing, sweat and drool spilled onto the floor, making him look miserable. That's not all. I showed him a photo of a life insurance policy taken out on me and a detailed pamphlet about car maintenance. There was a marked section about tampering with car brakes.
That's...
You not only wanted my family's money, but also my life? I have consulted the police, so you can't harm me anymore.
My company's in trouble. I need the money. Please help me.
Don't joke. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on. I never want to see your face again.
What?
As he lunged at me, my father and brother emerged from the back room, grabbing his arm and protecting me. My husband, pinned to the ground, cried, while my mother-in-law stood there, stunned. The house was purchased under my name. I'll be selling it, so please leave as soon as possible. My husband and mother-in-law, who always had an excuse not to leave, were sadly sent away by my brother. After that, I got a divorce. I received compensation from my husband and the woman he cheated with. He kept begging to get back together. When I threatened to consult the police because he was too persistent, he stopped coming around. Through a lawyer, I demanded repayment from my father-in-law's company, and the $100,000 my father had lent was safely returned. My father-in-law's business, which was already struggling, went bankrupt with a lot of debt. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband now live in an old apartment. They juggle multiple part-time and day jobs, but can't seem to keep up with their debts. I work as the director of a newly built hospital. With my brother's help, We are dedicated to helping those suffering from injuries and illness. It's fulfilling every day. I bought a comfortable apartment near the hospital, and I'm enjoying living my own life.
I'm divorcing you, you fool. My husband shouted over the phone just as I had returned from a business trip. I've put up with you so much until now, but I've reached my breaking point. If you don't want a divorce, apologize now. Understand? Yeah, I got it. But instead of heading to where my husband was, at my in-laws' place, I went somewhere else. My name is Sophie, 28 years old. I married my husband David, who was 2 years my senior, 3 years ago. To put it bluntly, my husband is the son of my company's future CEO. I originally worked for a different company, but after marrying David, I changed jobs. Since then, I've been working hard as an employee at my husband's company, preparing to become the next CEO's wife. He hesitated about me working at the same company, but there was no arguing with an order from the current CEO, his father. My work is demanding, and long business trips are the norm. We've been waiting to have a child, but the environment is just not relaxed enough to allow for a leisurely pregnancy. Lately, the relationship with my husband has been less than stellar. In fact, it's been deteriorating. We're both too busy, and we often end up arguing over trivial matters. Just the other day, my husband yelled at me as I was about to leave for work. "Hey, Sophie, why didn't you wake me up at the time I told you?" "I did wake you up several times, David. You yelled at me not to disturb you and that you'd wake up on your own, so I just went and prepared breakfast." "What? I never said anything like that. Stop lying." "I'm not lying. I tried to wake you up at least 20 times, and your alarm was blaring the whole time." "You can't imagine what's going to happen if I'm late today. I'll get chewed out by my dad again." "Why do I have to be the one who gets yelled at when it's his fault for not waking up?" I initially tolerated my husband's irrational scolding, but I finally began to push back. Because of this, we had a huge fight recently where he declared, "I want a divorce." Since our in-laws intervened, we were saved from such a major incident. Nevertheless, I was increasingly getting fed up with him throwing around the word divorce at every little issue. One day, while I was preparing for a business trip, my husband approached me with a sullen expression. "Hey, Sophie, you're off on another trip, huh?" Seemingly dissatisfied with my frequent business trips, my husband always derides them as trips. I responded, exasperated. "It's not a trip, it's a business trip. Why do you keep making me repeat the same thing?" "Must be nice always going on trips and neglecting the housework. You're probably just going sightseeing after pushing all the house chores on me, right?" "Listen, that's enough. This is for your company, you know. Why can't you just accept that it's a business trip? I can't imagine how it's like to be a rookie like you going on a business trip, being so useful. It's pretty much just like a trip." "What the hell is wrong with you? Can't you tell the difference between a trip and a business trip?" "Well, it's the truth, isn't it?" "You say I'm dumping the house chores on you, but you've never done anything around the house when I'm away on a business trip." "When I'm not around, my husband only ever orders takeout, leaves the laundry piled up, and doesn't even take out the garbage. Despite doing nothing, his attitude gives me so much stress. Even the divorce drama last time was all because of his personality. Even though we both work and spend the same amount of time on our jobs, all the housework is left to me. On top of that, he acts all superior and domineering, which I couldn't stand. Trying to discuss it with him is pointless, as he never admits to any fault on his part. Instead, he always turns it around and blames me. As I continued preparing for my business trip in silence, my husband started yelling at me again. For heaven's sakes, the future CEO's wife shouldn't be so casually taking business trips. If you're not firm like me, the other employees will walk all over you. Exactly, because I'm becoming the future CEO's wife, right? I have to learn the job and I need to meet with various clients. That's why I'm working so hard like this. First of all, we can live this good life because I'm the son of the CEO, right? You should listen to me more since it's thanks to me. What are you talking about? The company is doing well because of the employees who work, isn't it? Instead of acting high and mighty just because you're the CEO's son, you should work harder. To such words, my husband's face turned beet red and shouted, What did you say? What do you mean by work harder? The other day, I heard the other employees gossiping, you know. They said you always push overtime and bothersome tasks onto others and constantly complain. What? Who said that? I'll fire them on the spot. That's not the point. How can you not see that you're the one at fault? How can you not understand that you're sullying your father's name? My husband's eyes widened in anger, and he roughly pulled my bangs. Don't get too full of yourself. After all, who do you think got you this job at this company, huh? Ouch! Let go! You're able to work at this prestigious company because you married me. Got it? Refuse the business trip. I won't allow you to neglect the home for a business trip. I've said it many times. It can't be helped. It's for work. Shut up. Don't talk back. You married me, so you should just quietly listen to what I say. Suddenly, his hand released my hair, causing me to fall back on my butt due to the recoil. If this argument continues, I might lead to another divorce scare. I forcibly drove my ranting husband out of the room and prepared for my business trip. When I return, I'll have to take care of a week's worth of housework piled up by my husband. I bet the floor will be littered with clothes again, and the trash won't be taken out. With that thought, I felt tired even before the business trip. The next day, as planned, I went on the business trip. I performed my duties diligently without mixing personal feelings into my work. When I returned home after a week, the scene I couldn't believe was spread out before me. I'm home, eh? As far as the eye could see, the house was spotless, not a speck of dust in sight. It hadn't changed much since the day I left for my business trip. Thank goodness. Finally, David seemed to have understood my feelings. He must have had a change of heart and worked hard on the housework. Just as I started to feel relieved that my husband was finally cooperating, I found the completed divorce papers on the table. What? What's this? Next to it was a note saying, I'm going back to my parents' place. We're getting a divorce. In a panic, I quickly called my husband and he answered promptly. Did you read the divorce papers? His nonchalant tone provoked me and I fired back. Wait, are you serious about getting a divorce? Obviously. I mean, you'd be in trouble if I divorced you, right? Don't just casually talk about divorce. Then my husband said with a smug tone, If you're going to go that far, and he began to set out conditions. If you don't neglect the housework and listen to what I say, I might consider withdrawing the divorce, but of course, no more trips. What? I told you it wasn't a trip. Are you talking back? If so, I'm divorcing you. You're such a nag. Nag? A nag, he says? He can't do a single thing around the house himself. If he's up for it, so am I. Got it? If you don't want to be divorced, come and apologize now. Understand? Holding back my urge to yell back, I replied calmly, Okay, I understand. You should have done what I told you from the start. Now, come quickly. With that, he hung up the phone. Instead of heading to my in-laws' house where my husband was, I left the house to go to the city hall. Of course, to submit the divorce papers. They were accepted without a fuss, and I was officially single again. 3 hours later, while packing up at home, my ex-husband came back with his mother, probably impatient with my no-show. As soon as they saw me, they started hurling insults. Hey, how long are you going to keep me waiting? That's right. You're a failure as a wife, yet you're out having fun. You should be looking after David. Looking after... How old is David? He's older than me, isn't he? As I retorted, their brows furrowed in anger. Shut up. Stop being stubborn and apologize quickly. We'll really get a divorce. If you're the one who'll be in trouble if we get divorced, Sophie, you could have been the wife of the next company's president, and you're okay with that attitude? And you, if you divorce me, you won't be able to live in this lavish lifestyle. Are you okay with that? Well, I didn't think you were a good match for David in the first place, so I really don't care. At my loss for words, my ex-husband showed a devilish grin. Got it. This is your last chance. If you don't apologize now, we're getting a divorce. I'll kick you out of the company, too. Make up your mind quickly. At that moment, anger surged through me like a fireball. I had to let him know he didn't understand the situation he was in. We're already divorced, you know? What? Just as you wished. I've already submitted the divorce papers and they've been accepted, meaning I'm no longer your wife. What? Her ex-husband and mother-in-law just stood there, mouths agape. After a moment of silence, he finally found his voice. What are you talking about? This is a joke, right? There's no way you'd... Why would I lie? If you don't believe me, why don't you check the records yourself? No way! Suddenly, the mother-in-law who'd been listening started to shout. Wait, Sophie! What have you done? You've put divorce on David's record? Our future CEO? It was your son who handed me the divorce papers first. All I did was submitted them. Stop making excuses. Cancel the divorce immediately. Do you understand? I'm sorry, but once the divorce papers have been accepted, they can't be canceled. Besides, I have no intention of canceling. What? The mother-in-law was at a loss for words, and the ex-husband just hung his head. Ignoring those two, I spat. I've had enough of being ridiculed every time I go on a business trip, having to balance work and housework every day. As far as I'm concerned, you're nothing more than a burden. So, Sophie, calm down. Calm down? I'm perfectly calm. What's the point of being married if it's only in name? All you care about is yourself, isn't it? I didn't mean it like that. You do realize you're losing your place as the CEO's wife, right? Are you okay with that? I didn't transfer to your company because I wanted to become the CEO's wife. I don't know how much you've been pampered, but I didn't marry you to take care of you. Are you really ready to give up this lifestyle? If you'd just be patient a little longer, you'd be the CEO's wife. I absolutely refuse to continue being your caretaker. I'm not your mother. Just go live your life on your own. With the intensity like never before, my husband was completely teary-eyed. His mother-in-law took her turn stuttering out her final provocation. "Wait, Sophie! You don't understand what you're doing!" "What exactly?" "If you divorce David, you'll also lose your job." "And so what?" "What?" "I've already informed your father that I'll be quitting the company." "What?" The mother-in-law and ex-husband's eyes widened in surprise. To confirm the truth, my ex-husband started calling his father. After a few rings, his father answered and he put the call on speaker. "Dad, listen to this. Sophie went and decided to divorce me on her own." "Yeah, I heard. She told me she's quitting the company, too." "She's so selfish. Can't you fire her immediately with your CEO powers?" "Well, I guess I should fire someone ASAP. You." "Yeah, that's right. Wait, what?" In place of the dumbstruck ex-husband, his mother-in-law confronted her husband. "What do you mean by that?" "There's nothing to explain. David's a nuisance who contributes nothing to the company. I'm disappointed in your work ethic." "Wait, what? How can you suddenly say that about our son?" "Keep quiet." The father-in-law strongly rebuked his wife. "David, your work performance is poor. You use the company's supplies without permission. You casually make advances to female employees. You complain about the company cafeteria. You're just no good. Do you think I don't know that you're being called incompetent by your subordinates?" No, that's not true. It can't be." "I can't cover for you any longer, even if you are my son. You understand this, right? Being the boss's son doesn't make the company a sweet ride." "But that doesn't mean you have to fire me." "The only thing I can commend you for is marrying a capable wife. Sophie will continue to work for the company, but you're fired, David." At his father's words, my ex-husband's eyes widened in shock. Unfazed by his reaction, the father-in-law continued. "Unlike you, Sophie is meticulous in her work and brings in a lot of contracts. She's highly regarded by our clients. There are many companies that have contracted with us because of her." "Sophie? But she was just assigned to business trips because she's new." "Don't be ridiculous. We trusted Sophie, so we sent her on more business trips. You were making fun of her, calling it vacation or something, weren't you?" No, I didn't." "Let me tell you, there's no home for you to return to until you become independent. Never come back to this house. Got it?" No way." And so my ex-husband was disowned by his father-in-law, lost his job, and couldn't even return to his parents' home. When his mother tried to protect her son, his father told his wife, "It's because you spoil him," and was also given a divorce notice. The two of them used up their savings to start living in an apartment, but they have been unable to find work, and their unemployment continues. I still get messages from my ex-husband. "Sophie, I was wrong. I won't make fun of you anymore. I promise to take care of myself, so please come back. I can't take it anymore. Help me." He was so persistent that I finally blocked his number. I shouldn't have to deal with that mama's boy anymore. On the other hand, I'm still working hard under my father-in-law, who is the CEO. Now I have my own subordinates, and I'm spending fulfilling days. It's really good that my father-in-law is an understanding manager. From now on, I want to strive towards my goals without being trapped in meaningless family relationships.
Well, we've been married for a long time. I might find another woman I like. What's wrong with having an affair or two? Quit nagging me," shouted Anthony, my husband, defensively when I confronted him about his infidelity. "Instead, prepare for Christmas. You've bought the Christmas decoration and the cake, haven't you?" "I'm going to my mom's house for Christmas." Upon hearing that, Anthony pulled out a folded piece of paper from the cabinet drawer and forced it into my hand. "What? If you're leaving me, it's a divorce. Look, here's a completed divorce application." When I opened it, it was indeed a divorce application with Anthony's name on it. "Why do you have something like this prepared?" "The woman who you call an affair woman, she's the only one I truly love." "Oh, so that's how it's going to be. Caught having an affair with a woman 20 years younger, and now he's doubling down." In a fit of rage, I signed the divorce application with larger letters than usual. The unstoppable tears are not from sadness. I'm just incredibly pathetic for being with such a man. Well then, I have to make Anthony experience something worth crying over. I packed my stuff, left the house, went straight to the after-hours window at the town hall, and submitted the divorce application. Anthony was thoughtful enough to not only put his own name on the divorce application, but also prepared a witness. What's more, it seems that woman he's having an affair with is the witness. He's really making a fool out of me. As I left the town hall, I kicked a stone lying at my feet with all my might and started walking. I'm Margaret, a 55-year-old housewife working as an administrative assistant at an insurance agency. My only daughter, Tasha, is already married and lives in an apartment in the same town. I've been living with my husband, Anthony. When Tasha graduated from her 2-year college, Anthony quit his job and has become what he calls a day trader, and has been living an aimless life for a decade now. I don't know whether he's making any money or not doing anything, but he's barely contributing to living expenses these days. It was I who supported Anthony while working and feeling bitter about him. And the result is this affair and divorce application. Until Tasha graduated from the 2-year college, Anthony was a normal husband working at a financial institution. He did not do any housework, but he went to work in the morning and came home at night. He had overnight business trips once a month, and he had company parties or entertaining evenings once a week. He wasn't a heavy drinker nor a spendthrift. He was just an ordinary husband you might find anywhere. But looking back now, I suppose there were signs of strangeness, even back then. Given his line of work, I assumed business trips and client entertainment were par for the course, but it's possible that he was having affairs on some of those days. His one flaw as an otherwise ordinary husband was his fondness for women. My friend just got a job at the same company as Dad. My daughter Tasha once told me before she got married. Dad has a really bad reputation, you know. He's always hitting on the young women at the office, insisting on having female company at every drinking party. Apparently, he just loves being around young women. Really? That's quite embarrassing. And there are rumors of affairs, so you should be careful too, Mom. Until Tasha told me this, I'd never suspected Anthony of it. With a full-time job of my own and all the housework and child-rearing resting on my shoulders, I had no time to pay attention to Anthony's behavior. Even when I was swamped with housework, Anthony remained seated, and he wouldn't even pick up a crying Tasha when she was a little girl. He considered housework and child-rearing to be entirely the wife's duty. He seemed to believe that as long as he worked, meals would automatically be served and the house and clothes would magically be clean. At that time, I was exhausted from the double load of housework and my job, and I didn't have the energy to express my discontent to Anthony. Anthony and I are both only children. My father passed away due to an illness when I was in the 6th grade, and my mother raised me on her own afterward. It's all right, Margaret. We have your father's life insurance, and I work too. You don't have to worry about anything. My mother, who was a medical secretary, always told me with a smile. But I knew that she never bought anything she wanted for herself and used her money to support my going to vocational school. To me, she's the most respectable person and the most wonderful woman in the world. Now she's 75 years old and still living well at home. She has a boyfriend, and they laugh about being a couple with a combined age of 155. They always seem so happy. On the other hand, Anthony's mother was an impossible woman. One day, she ran away with her lover, leaving Anthony and his father, Jim. Fortunately, Anthony was already in college at the time and didn't need parental care, but Jim struggled to balance work with unfamiliar household chores. "Margaret, promise me you won't have an affair," Jim tearfully asked me when I married Anthony. "It's okay to slack off on the housework, and you don't have to always defer to Anthony. But please, I beg you, don't have an affair. There's nothing more painful than that." My father-in-law, Jim, is a man of wealth. He graciously lent us his own house free of charge, choosing to live in a small rented apartment himself. He is a quiet, kind man who never interferes unnecessarily in our lives or imposes his will on us. I appreciate and deeply care for him. I don't want to upset him, but I suppose I have no choice but to talk about our divorce and the reasons for it. After filing for divorce, before heading to my parents' house, I stopped by the apartment where my daughter Tasha lives. I wondered if she'd be home or if I'd be imposing, but I went anyway and found Tasha was home alone. What's with this impromptu divorce?" Hearing my news, Tasha choked on her coffee in surprise. "Are you okay?" "You surprised me, Mom." While waiting for Tasha to calm down, I explained everything in detail. "So, Dad had been preparing for the divorce long before?" "Exactly. It's a terrible story, isn't it?" "It's beyond terrible. He even filled in the witness section. He was too well prepared." Tasha tilted her head as she said this, munching on some cookies I had bought on my way. I don't know who she takes after, but she's always had a knack for seeing through situations. Then Tasha suddenly looked up. "Hasn't Dad always loved women?" "Well, I secretly looked at your father's computer, and there were tons of unspeakable pictures and videos saved. And he was often away from home due to business trips and drinking parties, so it wouldn't be surprising if he was having an affair, but he never let his guard down before." I somehow started to get what Tasha was trying to say. But this time he carelessly exposed his affair so that I could notice. "Maybe Dad purposefully made you aware of his affair so that he could be with that woman. But if you were to calmly consider divorce, there would be discussions about alimony and division of property. So he might have instigated me to impulsively file for divorce. That would explain why he had the divorce papers signed by a witness ready. And indeed, I had acted exactly that way. It's unforgivable, indeed, as Tasha says. Even though Anthony is now an uncertain day trader, he had been working at a top-tier financial institution for many years. He must have some savings, and it's not like he would have brought all his severance pay home. If I had calmly initiated divorce mediation or a lawsuit, I could have contested Anthony's assets, I thought. "Mom, we can't stay silent. We have to give Dad a taste of his own medicine. This is too much," Tasha said, grabbing my hand, a strong look in her eyes as I felt tears welling up. I nod, gripping her hand back, and tears that I can't hold back appear. Regrettable. I got frustrated, nothing but frustrated. I left Tasha, who couldn't accompany me due to incoming guests, and headed alone to my childhood home. "Even if you say we should give him a taste of his own medicine, he's still your father, Tasha. Are you really okay with this?" Tasha sighed as if exasperated. "Because he's my father, I didn't like what he did. It's embarrassing being called out by friends because my father is a womanizer. So I'm really okay with it." If Tasha said so, I decided I'd tell my father-in-law everything. When I arrived at my childhood home, I rang the doorbell, making that decision in my mind. "Coming." My mother's cheerful voice followed, and the front door opened. Her youthful face, unbelievably youthful for a 75-year-old, greeted me with a big smile. "Oh, Margaret, welcome. It must be cold outside. I stopped by Tasha's house and warmed up, so I'm okay. Can I come in?" "Of course. Please do." "You've been enjoying your time with Jim, haven't you? Sorry for the intrusion." Apologizing to my mother, I entered the house and headed to the living room. A small, warm house I've known since childhood, and now it's where my mother nurtures love with her special person in their twilight years. When I entered the living room, he was reading some brochure at the table. "Hello, Jim." When I called out, he looked up and smiled broadly. "Oh, Margaret, I thought you'd be preparing for Christmas around this time, but have you finished already?" Yes, my mother's lover is my father-in-law, Anthony's father. It seems they both had feelings for each other for a long time, but due to their positions as parents-in-law, they suppressed those feelings. However, now in the last stage of their lives, they told me they finally decided to be honest about their feelings for each other. Anthony still doesn't know about this. Jim, as I look at my father-in-law's calm face, which doesn't resemble Anthony's much, I begin to weep uncontrollably. "What's the matter, Margaret?" Jim says, his face changing with concern. My mother, who had been carrying a tray with a teacup on it, must have been startled when she saw me crying. She hastily set the tray on the table and helped me to sit down. "Jim, Mom, I filed for divorce at the city hall before coming here." Tears streaming down my face, I told them everything that had happened. The person most shocked by the news was probably Jim. "Anthony, having an affair of all things. Margaret, I'm truly sorry," he said after listening to my story, deeply bowing his head to me. "It's not your fault, Jim. You don't have to apologize." I had always told him that having an affair is the one thing he must not do, with his mother having run away with another man. I thought Anthony understood that, Jim muttered, looking pained. Then he picked up his smartphone from the table. Despite being 80, he was better at using a smartphone than I was. "I'll call Anthony here. We need to talk. Leaving you without a penny after having an affair, I won't allow him to just get a divorce like that." Jim stood up and quietly left the living room. My smartphone rang a few minutes after he left. It was Anthony. I declined his call, but he called back almost instantly. After his relentless attempts, I finally answered the phone on the 12th ring. "What the hell, Margaret?" Anthony was clearly upset. "Dad called me super angry and told me to come to your parents' house right away. That's because of the divorce papers I filed at City Hall. But why at your parents'? Why did you call Dad there?" Anthony, who didn't know about Jim and my mother, was understandably confused. "Anyway, you better come quickly. You know how much Dad despises infidelity, right?" "You told him I cheated?" "It's the reason for our divorce. I had to tell him. Anthony is probably wary of upsetting his wealthy father-in-law, Jim, who's been generously letting us live in his house for free. Even though Jim is incredibly spry for his age, Anthony is conscious of Jim's fortune." "Is Tasha at your parents' house too? And your mother-in-law?" "They're both here, along with Jim, of course." Upon hearing that, Anthony told me he'd be on his way over and hung up. He must be feeling uneasy knowing that Jim is aware of his infidelity. Jim was deeply hurt by his own wife's infidelity, which led her to abandon him. For that reason, he wouldn't forgive Anthony's affair. While waiting for Anthony in the living room, I noticed Jim was looking at something, a brochure for a nursing home. "Jim and Mom, are you considering a nursing home?" After skimming the brochure, I asked my mother, who was sitting at the table. "Well, yes. Jim and I can currently take care of ourselves, but we don't know how long we'll be able to do so. We're both getting old after all." Mom, who affectionately calls Jim by his name, doesn't look anything like a typical grandmother. "So we are currently researching various nursing homes that could accommodate both of us. It's so lovely that you two are so close. Seeing you so happy makes me happy too. But now we have a big worry. Margaret, you're suddenly getting a divorce." As Mom looked troubled and we continued to chat, Jim came back, holding a piece of paper in his right hand. I was about to ask what it was when the doorbell rang. "That must be Anthony. Don't worry, I'll get it." With resolve, I stood up and went to answer the door. "What is this?" The moment he saw my face, Anthony's expression turned grim. Can't believe you told Jim about my affair, and why here at your parents' house. You'll understand once you get inside. Come on in, okay? I would have done that even if you hadn't told me to. As Anthony took off his shoes and rushed into the living room, he stopped in his tracks the moment he saw Jim and Mom sitting side by side. Their image together, reminiscent of a long married couple, must have given him a clue about the situation. Dad? Mother-in-law, wait, are you two... Sit down there. You're dating her? No way. I said sit down there. Jim's voice echoed in the living room like thunder. At his intensity, I found myself straightening up without thinking. When usually calm Jim gets angry, he's this terrifying. Anthony, the one being yelled at, had lost the confidence he had when he thrust the divorce papers at me and sat down in front of Jim with a frightened look on his face. I heard from Margaret, when she confronted you about your affair, you lashed back and handed her divorce papers? Well, about that. On top of that, the divorce papers were filled out and one of the witnesses was the woman you were cheating with. Is that true? Well, it was just the way things went, or a difference in perception. I'm asking if it's true. Stop beating around the bush and answer me. Again, Jim's voice thundered. Flustered, Anthony mumbled a small, "It's true. I'm sorry." Anthony, after you claimed to be hurt by your mom's affair, how could you do the same thing to Margaret? Moreover, having divorce papers ready and forcing her to file them? I just handed her the papers. I never thought she would actually file. You think that excuse is going to work? Do you have any idea how much your actions hurt Margaret? Jim said this as he spread out a piece of paper he had brought with him on the table. It was a blank marriage certificate. I wondered whether Anthony had brought it with him or if it had been with Jim from before. Anthony, as you might have guessed, I've been dating Margaret's mom. You've severely insulted and deeply hurt my special lady's daughter. I had no idea. I never dreamed that you and my mother-in-law would be dating. That doesn't change the fact that you cheated. Jim cut off Anthony's excuses and started speaking like a judge handing down a verdict. I'm not helping you anymore. The house I'm lending you for free, I'm going to sell it right away. Find an apartment and move out immediately. No way! I don't have the money to rent an apartment. Aren't you making money day trading? Besides, whether you have the money or not, I'm selling that house right after Christmas, so you can't stay there anymore. But Anthony looked down for a moment, but then he noticed the marriage certificate on the table and looked up. His expression was different than before, filled with anxiety. What's that marriage license for? Surely you're not thinking of getting married. That surely is exactly what we're thinking. We're getting married. But if you do that, the inheritance I'd get from you will be halved. Anthony blurted out reflexively, then in the next moment gasped and covered his mouth. He must have realized he misspoke. But once a word is spoken, it can't be taken back. What did you just say? I decided to seize the opportunity to corner him. Your dad has always been so supportive of us, and he's been generously lending us this house for so long. Yet when he tells you he's getting remarried, you're worried about your inheritance decreasing? That's just too much. Exactly, I can't forgive what you've done to Margaret either. Until then, my mother had been silent, but she joined the conversation. Anyway, start looking for an apartment and move out. That house belongs to your dad, and if he says he wants to sell it, we can't argue with that. But I can't afford to rent two places, one for me and the other one for... Anthony muttered under his breath, then clamped his mouth shut again. But I had clearly heard what he said. Rent for him and the other person? Anthony, are you paying rent for your mistress too? My father-in-law unleashed what felt like the loudest roar of the day. I'm sorry. You've been neglecting your contributions to the household expenses and you've been doing this? That's too much even for you. It's an insult to both Margaret and Tasha. It wasn't just my father-in-law, but my mother also turned red with anger. I felt so angry, I thought I was going to be sick. I've had enough. Anthony, as soon as the real estate market opens after Christmas, rent an apartment and leave that house. But I won't leave you the inheritance. I'll spend my fortune freely. In the end, we'll move into a luxurious assisted living facility, and there will be hardly anything left for you. As he delivered his words like a blow, my father-in-law stood up and pointed towards the door. The discussion is over. Get out. But wait, I don't have that much money. Quiet. I told you to get out. Whether he gave up due to that intensity or not, Anthony stood up powerlessly, leaving the house. It seemed he was relying on Jim's fortune, living freely and showering women with gifts. I felt no pity watching his staggering figure leaving. So Christmas arrived, and just as Jim had declared, the house was put up for sale, and a buyer was found in no time. The place Anthony moved to after losing his residence was a rundown, cheap apartment. Apparently, for the past 10 years, he had been living off his retirement savings without making any serious attempts at day trading. He must have thought he'd live off Jim's fortune eventually, once it was inherited. Once he couldn't pay the rent for his mistress anymore, Anthony was dumped in no time. Seems like he was luring women by dangling his supposed inheritance in front of them. Indeed, the end of the money marked the end of the relationship. Now Anthony is living a solitary life, working multiple part-time jobs. Jim sold the house and paid me all the money as compensation. I used that money to buy a small but comfortable condo where I now live comfortably. I have a pretty fulfilling life, inviting friends over for meals on my days off or visiting my parents' house and Tasha's place. On the other hand, my parents officially submitted their marriage certificate and became a real couple. The meaning of the term dad has changed for me. Perhaps being aware of that, my dad now casually calls me Margaret. Seeing my mom, who had worked so hard to raise me, smile happily is truly a joy. From the bottom of my heart, I wish for my parents, clutching onto this great happiness they found in their twilight years, to live out peaceful days.
John, my husband who had been cheating for years, suddenly passed away. It happened while he was fooling around in one of his affair partner's apartments, only for another affair partner to burst in. Trying to escape, John, naked and clutching his clothes, fell off the balcony. I went to the scene. It was only the second floor. It wasn't that high, and he might have broken some bones, but should have survived. John must have thought he could jump and get away. He was just unlucky. Maybe this was some sort of cosmic punishment for him. When the police showed me a photo of John lying there, I felt less sadness than a sense that he got what he deserved. I was tired of his antics, and any love I once had for my breadwinning husband was long gone. To be honest, I didn't much care about the outcome. The bigger issue now is my mother-in-law, Sarah. I'm Nancy, a soon-to-be 45-year-old working mom. I married John 12 years ago, but we only started living with my in-laws 3 years ago. The catalyst was the passing of my father-in-law, Daniel. Sarah and I used to get along until she learned John was hardly ever home because he was cheating with multiple women. Especially when she drinks, she gets nasty. Sarah loves alcohol and always drinks at night, but she can't handle her booze. I hate to say it, but I often get blamed for John's affairs. People always assume, if John is cheating, then it must be Nancy's fault, right? Some even go as far as to say, Nancy lacks charm. It's her fault for not being enough for John. My mother-in-law, Sarah, always defends John. Why should John settle for someone as unattractive as Nancy? I was looking forward to having handsome grandchildren who look like John. It's one thing when she talks about me, but I can't stand it when she talks about Elizabeth, who is similar to me. I hate to break it to you, but John doesn't want to leave me. And wasn't it you, Sarah, who wanted us to live together? Shut your mouth. You're telling blatant lies. You should be serving your mother-in-law, not talking back. Sarah always dismisses anything that doesn't suit her agenda, saying a daughter-in-law should simply endure. Come to think of it, it makes sense that John turned out the way he did with a mother like Sarah. I finally gave up on both John and Sarah. So why haven't I divorced John, a man with terrible drinking habits and a penchant for affairs? 3 reasons. First, Elizabeth. When she was little, she adored John. He may have been a cheater, but until Elizabeth started elementary school, he was a loving, perfect father to her. He changed diapers, played with her, and genuinely cherished her. Elizabeth was truly special to me, and all I wanted was for him to continue to be a good husband and father. That's why I found it so hard to take the step toward divorce. But here's the thing. As Elizabeth grew older and more assertive, John reverted back to his old cheating ways. However, he still took care of Elizabeth, so I didn't want to consider divorce until the child-rearing years were behind us. The second reason was money. It might not be a proud thing to say, but when I started thinking of John merely as a source of income, it eased my stress somewhat. John had been a serial cheater even before our marriage. Every time he was caught, it led to a huge argument over whether or not to break up. Although I tried to endure it for Elizabeth's sake, it still angered me. John would beg, "You're the one I really love. I'll never cheat again. Please don't divorce me." Accepting his teary apologies was my first mistake. He got it in his head that, as long as I apologize dramatically, she'll forgive me. Even when I would explode in anger and declare, "I will definitely divorce you this time," John would cling to me crying, and would behave for a while. This became the pattern. I've tried several times to put an end to things with John, but I didn't want to negate all the good memories we had. And he is a kind father to Elizabeth. However, with every affair, my love for him diminishes. So, for example, I changed the beneficiary of John's life insurance from Sarah to myself, and transferred John's savings from his bachelor days into my own fixed deposit account. Nowadays, John doesn't have much in the ways of assets. If you're not planning to leave me, that's fine, right? Since John kept cheating, I had come to terms with thinking of him mainly as the breadwinner. And yet, we were making it work in a dysfunctional sort of way. Who would have thought he'd die in such a stupid way? It caught me completely off guard. Now, the third and final reason. Sarah thinks she's my trump card for why I didn't leave John. Elizabeth and I can't go back to our family home. My brother currently runs the family estate, and it's a full house with my parents, his wife, their 3 kids, and even my grandmother. So going back home is physically impossible. This happened right after John died. While I was swamped with funeral arrangements, dealing with the police, and managing his affairs, Sarah did none of the work and started drinking during the day. "Seems like I can't handle it sober," she said. Drunk Sarah told me, "Hey, Nancy, you don't have anywhere else to go, do you? I'll keep you here just like before." With a nasty grin. "Uh-huh, but John is gone." It struck me as absurd she'd bring this up before even the funeral, but now that John is gone, I had no intention of putting up with living with her. However, not being able to return home did worry me. Sarah knows this too. "But Nancy, you have nowhere to go back to. Don't forget Elizabeth. She's John's legacy. It's only right you stay here, and you're obligated to take care of me in my old age. You're not planning to hog the inheritance, are you?" Sarah clearly expects me to care for her. John's personal inheritance isn't much, but Sarah doesn't know that. I decided not to respond, and instead asked, "Aren't you sad that John, whom you bragged about so much, is gone?" "Of course I'm sad, But with that foolish end, it's just too embarrassing to talk about. Couldn't he have done it better? Sarah was angry, but I felt torn. Is that all you have to say? Sarah always sided with John, even when he cheated. But in the end, her public image and her future seemed more important to her. Then it hit me. I remembered hearing somewhere that if your spouse dies, your ties to your in-laws don't necessarily get severed. Sarah may be expecting me to take care of her, but there's no way I'm doing that. I excused myself, saying, "I'm sorry, I'm busy with paperwork right now," and ended the conversation. I searched for a lawyer on my mobile phone and decided to consult with them after the funeral. A few weeks went by. It's best to leave it to professionals. They really are different. My lawyer assured me, "You don't need any legal procedures to cut off ties with your in-laws after your husband's death." Apparently, going through the estate distribution process will sever those legal ties. He also kindly explained that there are various forms of public assistance available for single mother households, including housing subsidies for apartments. Given all this helpful information and advice, I decided to take action. I was worried about what to do since I couldn't go back to my hometown, but Elizabeth has grown up and is now in 4th grade. She doesn't require as much attention as she did when she was little, so I resolved to start looking for an apartment for just the two of us. I had also consulted the lawyer about John's estate. Luckily, John had transferred most of his assets into my name and had organized all the necessary insurance policies and documents when he changed the beneficiary, so everything went smoothly. Heeding the lawyer's advice, I decided to take legal action against John's mistresses as well. John, ever the meticulous person, had noted down the contact information and addresses of his mistresses, 7 in total. I demanded compensation from each of them, ensuring they financially regretted their involvement with the married man. Time flew by, and before I knew it, John's memorial service was upon us. Sarah was desperate to hide the real reason for John's death from the family, claiming at the funeral that it was a sudden accident. Yet, when Elizabeth stood silently weeping next to John's coffin, no one dared to say a word. I later heard from a relative that everyone had already heard rumors about the real reason. However, out of respect, she couldn't ask detailed questions with the daughter of the deceased present, so she was waiting for the right opportunity. Well, there's a saying that other people's misfortune tastes like honey. It was shocking news about someone close, so she was probably all ears. After the memorial service concluded and dinner began, the drinks started flowing. Once Elizabeth had eaten, she announced, "I'm going to go explore around," and left the table. Seizing the opportunity, one of the relatives asked Sarah, "Is it true that John was having an affair and that it was a terrible situation?" Sarah's face instantly turned furious. She had been drinking, so she couldn't hold back. "Why would you bring that up? Nancy must have told you," she shouted, livid. Accusations based on misunderstandings. The truth was, John's fall had made minor headlines. Moreover, he didn't fall from our house, but from another apartment. A little research would have provided enough clues, but Sarah trapped herself when she admitted, "It's because of a bad wife like Nancy that John was with other women. Nancy is the reason John is dead." All I could muster was, "It's not me. Please calm down." Sarah was in no mood to listen. She blamed me for everything, even went as far as saying, "It's because of a terrible daughter-in-law like Nancy that John cheated. It's Nancy's fault that John died." And when an uncle from the family chimed in saying, "Come on, aren't you going a bit too far?" I was still looked down upon by relatives. They whispered, "No wonder her son couldn't be happy with a mother like that." And, "With a mom like that, the son doesn't stand a chance." On the flip side, people comforted me. They said, "Nancy, you had it rough. Dump a mother-in-law and husband like that, pronto." And, "Don't hesitate to lean on us. We'll be here for you." Sarah, clearly unhappy with the situation, kept drinking and became even more unruly. She even yelled at Elizabeth when she returned to the scene. "I never wanted an unattractive grandchild who takes after her mother. All of you, just get out." Then she passed out. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. The next day, Elizabeth and I were busy packing up in the morning when Sarah woke up around noon. When she saw us, she asked, "Where are you planning to go?" "We're leaving, just like you told us to," I answered. Sarah looked surprised for a second, but then smirked. "You're lying, Nancy. Where could you possibly go?" "No, I've rented an apartment. If I can't go back to my parents' house, I'll live somewhere else." "And what about taking care of me?" "You can take care of yourself. Also, I've already sorted out the inheritance." "What are you talking about?" "So now I'm just a stranger, not John's wife anymore." "What? But Elizabeth is John's daughter. She shares my blood. She can take care of me." "No thanks. I won't sacrifice sweet Elizabeth's future for elder care. You announced in front of everyone that we should leave because you don't need Elizabeth, remember? Our relatives are willing to be witnesses. We're leaving, just like you wanted." Last night, after Sarah had gone to sleep, I talked to our relatives and told them we were planning to leave. All the relatives who saw Sarah's outrageous behavior were convinced. Sarah, frustrated that things didn't go her way, stomped her feet. "Then leave John's inheritance behind." "The inheritance is actually negative, just a heap of debt from consumer loans. Can you handle that, Sarah?" John had been cheating all over the place. Even though I was the one managing our savings and his income, I always wondered where he got the money to mess around. It turns out John had been secretly accumulating debt, something I discovered while investigating his affairs and going through his belongings. "How much is it?" Sarah nervously inquired. "Roughly around $30,000. Oh, I'm going to renounce the inheritance, so please take care of it, Sarah." As Sarah stood there speechless, I quickly made my exit. Renouncing the inheritance is the only way to avoid repaying the debt. I have alimony from 7 people and will receive John's life insurance payout. Life insurance isn't subject to inheritance, so renouncing it doesn't affect me. But Sarah can't renounce it, or rather, she can't afford to. After Daniel passed away, as part of inheritance planning, the house she lived in was put in John's name. She can't just renounce the debt and would lose her house if she renounced the inheritance. I don't plan to continue living in the in-laws' house, so I don't mind renouncing it. "Fine, I can pay off $30,000. I have a house." I heard Sarah yell from a distance. She's naive. Her only option for repaying is her pension. But the terrifying thing about consumer loan interest is that it compounds. Depending on the monthly repayment, the debt could stay the same or even increase. She'll be in debt forever. Regardless of what happens next, neither Elizabeth nor I plan on helping her out. We made sure to declare this to the relatives after Sarah got wasted at the memorial service, securing their support. After that, Elizabeth and I started living in an apartment. Life is stress-free, comfortable, and happy. Just the 2 of us.
Hey, sis, I'm looking at souvenirs right now. What should I get?
What have you been up to? You haven't contacted me in forever.
Huh? You tried reaching out?
Didn't notice. What happened? How can you be so carefree? I'm in the middle of a funeral.
A funeral? What are you talking about?
Whose? Your daughter's.
What do you mean?
It all happened on the day my sister said she was going on vacation and left her daughter Ellie with me. Despite knowing that Ellie had a fever, my sister left anyway. I reached out multiple times, but no response. By the time she did get back, it was too late. I was beyond furious. My concern after being married for 4 years has been our inability to have children. We planned for a family right after getting married and have made several attempts to make it happen, but we've been unlucky so far.
My sister got pregnant 2 years ago, married, but divorced within 6 months. Since then, she's been dumping her kid on me.
It's good practice for when you have kids of your own, so it's fine, right?
She would always say this when leaving her child with me. Each time, it gave me mixed feelings. Still, a life is a life, and I accepted the responsibility. But I've had enough of my needs being ignored, so this time as well.
I want to leave Ellie with you again because I'm going on a trip with friends for a week.
Again? Didn't I just take care of her last week?
That was for work. It couldn't be helped.
Why can't you ask our parents for a change? I have plans too, you know?
What plans kid you? A house worker possibly have? It's fine, right?
But for a whole week?
I'll bring back souvenirs. This is a long-planned international trip. I can't cancel.
Then why not take Ellie with you?
Having a kid along would be a nuisance to others. Plus, I want to enjoy myself alone.
Ellie will feel lonely. You're being completely selfish.
So that's how it is? I'll bring her over before I leave tomorrow. Bye!
Sighing at the abruptly ended phone call, I decided to talk to my husband about the situation when he got home from work. Well, isn't that something?
Yeah, it is. So I need your help with this.
Sorry, I'll be away on an extended business trip starting tomorrow.
Really? How long will you be gone?
About 5 days? Maybe a week if the meetings drag on.
So I have to take care of everything alone while you're away?
It's my job. Can't help it.
Fine.
If it's too much, maybe consult with my mom. I couldn't believe I'd be left alone to manage everything for a whole week. I felt like giving up already. My niece was incredibly attached to my husband, probably because she doesn't have a father figure in her life. I remember a past instance when we babysat her, and she had a terrible night of crying. My husband was the one who soothed her, but this time I'd be alone. Just the thought of going through that again filled me with dread. Then the day of my sister's trip came. My husband left early for his business trip, and I was alone waiting for my sister.
Take care then.
With that, my sister was about to dash off. But then I noticed something off with my niece. Ellie, your face looks a bit red, doesn't it?
She's been running a slight fever since this morning.
What? You're leaving your kid like this?
I've been looking forward to this trip. I can't not go.
At least take her to the doctor.
It's nothing unusual. She'll be fine. If you're concerned, you take her. I have to go. My flight is soon.
Wait a minute.
Consider it good practice for when you have a sick child of your own. You learn. Bye.
I couldn't believe she would leave her feverish child and go on a trip. An intense wave of anxiety rushed over me as I looked at my weary niece. She's only too young for over-the-counter medicine. Fortunately, it seemed like a low-grade fever, so I cooled her head and put her to bed. Not knowing what else to do, I called my mother.
Mom, she dumped Ellie on me again. She's even gone on vacation this time. And Ellie seems to have a fever. What should I do?
Stay calm. Is the fever very high?
It's a low-grade fever for now.
Then keep an eye on her. If she has seizures or convulsions, call an ambulance immediately.
All right.
Contact me if anything happens. Hearing my mother's words slightly alleviated my anxiety, but I still couldn't bear the thought of going through this for a whole week. It pained me to watch her suffer, even if it was just a low-grade fever. That night, my niece's condition took a turn for the worse. Her fever spiked rapidly, and seeing her suffer, I hurriedly called an ambulance. I tried to call my sister too, but for some reason, she didn't answer.
Why can't I get through? Could it be because she's abroad?
I then tried to reach my husband, but had no luck there either.
Is his phone out of service?
While feeling like I was going to be crushed by anxiety, I called my mom, and she arrived right away.
Mom, what should I do? I'm...
Don't worry, the doctors are on it. She'll be fine. But there was no improvement, and her condition worsened. I tried to reach my sister every hour, but no response. And then, 4 days later,
No way! This can't be! I'm so sorry! So sorry.
Ellie passed away. She was just 2 years old and didn't even get to see her mom one last time. I broke down crying, not knowing what to do. It's not your fault. There was nothing you could have done.
I know, but still.
And what is she doing? Not answering any calls? What could she be up to?
If I've known it would come to this, I would have asked for her hotel at least.
Filling up with regret, I had Ellie's body taken to the funeral home. I couldn't get a hold of either my sister or my husband to discuss what to do next. His business trip was supposed to end tomorrow, so all I could do was wait. Seeing how worn out I was, my mom told me to get some rest, and I finally got a good night's sleep for the first time in 4 days. The next day, I tried calling my sister again with no change. My husband didn't return either. Growing concerned, I decided to contact his office. They said he was actually on a week-long leave. I felt a bad premonition. I never paid it much attention before, but Ellie was fond of my husband, and he get along well with my sister. My husband would often tell my sister she was cute, and she seemed to enjoy it. And when my sister would leave Ellie with us, my husband often returned home late. But lately, they came back together. Once the suspicion began, it snowballed. The day they both left was the same, and the number of days they've been missing is the same too. Is this a coincidence? I went to check my sister's Instagram and found photos from 2 days ago. She was in a hotel room, enjoying room service. Upon closer examination of the photos, I noticed my husband's reflection in the mirror. I was convinced that they were having an affair. Leaving a sick child behind for an affair, and with her own sister's husband at that. Unforgivable. I saved the photos, and in between arranging Ellie's funeral, I obtained divorce papers. 2 days later, Ellie's funeral took place with only family members present.
Why isn't she here?
Still no contact? That's right.
Not being at her child's funeral. What kind of mother is she? Unbelievable.
Finally, my sister called, just as our parents were fuming.
Hey, sis! I'm at the airport shopping for souvenirs. I'll be back today, so I'm wondering what you'd like. I also want to thank you for taking care of Ellie.
What have you been doing all this time?
I was on vacation.
We tried reaching you multiple times. Why didn't you pick up?
Huh? Sorry, I didn't notice. Maybe because I was abroad. Anyway, do you want anything?
We're in the middle of a funeral right now. Let's talk later.
Whose funeral?
Your daughter's.
What? What are you talking about?
Ellie passed away 2 days ago.
Wait, I don't understand.
Ellie had a fever and you just left her. She was calling for you, saying mom, mom until the very end.
Huh?
You're essentially responsible for your own daughter's death.
Wait a minute.
If you can't believe it, come back home.
That night, astonishingly, my sister came back home with my husband. Seeing my husband comfort my sister as she broke down in tears made me feel disgusted.
I'm sorry. If I had been there for her, I'm truly sorry.
I know this is a bad time, but I have a question.
What is it?
Ever since the night you left for your trip, I've been trying to contact you every day. I've called, sent text messages, and even WhatsApp messages, but you never responded. Why is that?
Well, I was abroad and I couldn't use my mobile phone.
Is that so? Then what's this? I showed her a picture from her Instagram. This was posted 4 days ago. If you could post this, then you must have been able to use your phone at the hotel, right? You noticed my messages but found it too troublesome to reply, didn't you? That's why your WhatsApp messages were never marked as read. You simply didn't want to communicate with me. Am I wrong?
That's not true.
Let's ask the other person in the photo then.
The other person?
Did you enjoy your trip with my sister?
What?
I zoomed in on the photo and showed it to both my husband and my sister. Both of them turned pale as ghosts. Our parents, who also saw the photo, were shocked.
Looks like it's you in the mirror reflection.
Care to explain?
Isn't that a mistake? I was on a business trip.
I contacted your company. They said you were on a vacation for an entire week. If it wasn't you in the photo, then where were you? You must have had a great time posting a photo like that. But you made one big mistake.
I didn't think I would be caught in the reflection.
I'm sorry.
Finally, both of them admitted to their affair. The tension in the room was palpable. My parents were livid.
What on earth are you doing?
I can't believe you abandoned your child for a fling. You're no daughter of ours anymore. We're cutting you off.
I tolerated this because you were a single mother. But we've been giving you so much money. I want it all back. I never want to see your face again.
Hold on, Mom, Dad.
Quiet. Don't even come back.
Can't you say something, sis?
What's there to say? This is all on you. I hope you regret this for the rest of your life. I couldn't bear my sister's negligence towards her child, so I told her off coldly. My sister kept apologizing to Ellie through her tears, but Ellie never returned. And of course, I couldn't forgive my husband, who had been supporting her. This involves you too.
What?
Sign this now. We'll discuss the compensation through lawyers.
A divorce? Why?
Why? Are you kidding? I can't be with someone who cheats with my sister.
Wait, I messed up. We can talk about this.
Talk? You lied about a business trip to go on a cheating getaway. There's no talking to you.
Oh, well.
Any more discussion will go through the lawyer. I submitted the divorce papers to the court, and it was agreed that they would both pay me a total of $50,000 in compensation. I left the house and returned to my parents. Here I am again. I'm sorry.
Don't worry about it.
You're our only daughter.
Exactly. Better be here than with some creep.
I'll be in your care for a while. My sister and her husband apparently got together after this, but it didn't work out and they broke up in less than 6 months. To pay off the compensation, my sister is working all the time and now lives modestly in an old apartment. My ex-husband worked at his company for a while, but became uncomfortable after his affair was exposed. After paying the compensation, he disappeared. And frankly, I don't care anymore. Now, I'm enjoying a peaceful life. Making plans to travel with my parents, it's liberating. I'm fine alone for now, but I do want kids someday. Hopefully, I'll meet someone wonderful.
My name is Raina. I married John, a former colleague of mine, when I was 28. John was raised by a single mom, Sandy, so he wanted us to live with his mom after we got married. I was fine with that and decided to quit my job. On my last day at work, my colleagues bid me farewell, and I moved into John's family home. I thought disputes between mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law wouldn't concern me, but boy was I wrong when I started living with Sandy. "Welcome, Raina. We're an open family here." Sandy greeted me warmly, and I liked her initially, but the niceness was short-lived. If I cooked, she'd say, "Yuck! This is terrible, Raina. You can't cook." "Oh, sorry. I say whatever comes to mind." And if I took a break, "Raina, have you put on weight? Your back looks sturdy all of a sudden." "Oops, there I go again, speaking my mind." I wasn't gaining weight. I was actually losing weight from stress. Sandy seemed oblivious to the stress she was causing me. "Hey, Raina, you look awful. Dark circles under your eyes, and you shouldn't let yourself go because you're married. John might run away, especially since you're not all that pretty to begin with." Enough is enough. I'm not the most patient person. I've put up with this because we're family, but I was getting fed up with the constant jabs. I decided to stand up to Sandy. "I get it, Sandy. You're outspoken and you say what's on your mind. But if you keep telling me every day that my cooking is bad, I'm bad at cleaning, I've gained weight, or I'm not pretty, I might just lose it." Sandy, who was nibbling on a cookie while I spoke, seemed genuinely shocked that I'd stand up to her. After a pause, she sighed deeply, clearly displeased. "Oh, I was saying these things for your own good, Raina. It makes me sad to hear you talk like this. I thought of you like my own daughter, so I don't hold back. If you're that sensitive, you won't be able to handle what John does either." "Huh? What are you talking about?" With her chin raised, Sandy swiftly retreated to her room, leaving me puzzled by her cryptic words. I had a sense that John was hiding something from me. Sandy, never one for keeping secrets, was terrible at hiding the truth. From that day on, whenever Sandy made snide remarks, I started responding with phrases like, "That's hurtful," or "I find that offensive." As if to get back at me, Sandy began dropping hints about John's secret little by little. I can see why John would do something like that. John's business trips have increased a lot since we got married. I wonder why. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. Sandy spilled the beans. "Raina, you're so sensitive. It's understandable that John would stray." "You just admitted it." "What?" Sandy feigned confusion as I shoved my phone in her face. "I recorded our conversation. This will be evidence of John's infidelity. I'm planning to divorce him and seek damages." "What? No way! I might be mistaken." "No. John has been unfaithful. I have plenty of other evidence, too. I intend to divorce him and get a nice sum from his affair partner." Truth be told, I didn't need Sandy's admission. I had already gathered plenty of evidence on John, but I recorded her words out of a sense of revenge. When it came to divorce negotiations, playing that recording, John had him exclaiming, "Mom, why?" Sandy shrunk in her seat, mumbling apologies. And so my marriage to John came to an end after just a year. We consulted a lawyer, and it was agreed that I'd receive financial compensation from both John and his affair partner. I also knew the day I would be leaving this house full of in-laws. Sandy might lack common sense, but her son John was no better. After our divorce, he was planning to marry his affair partner, Zaria, and had the audacity announced that they, including Sandy, would be going on a honeymoon. And they planned to leave the day I was moving out. Just as I thought I never meant anything to John, I felt disgusted toward him, Sandy, and his affair partner. Before my moving day, Zaria had no qualms about coming to the house. She would hug John, spread out travel magazines on the living room table, eat the food I prepared, and then leave. Is her skin made of steel? I wondered. Sandy wasn't just unkind to me. She treated Zaria the same way, too. But Zaria didn't seem to mind. When Sandy said, "Wow, you really caked on the makeup today. It's a bit overpowering," Zaria replied, "Oh, my makeup is really on point today." I was shocked. Maybe you need a heart that strong to be the wife in this house. I actually felt a bit of admiration. Still, my days living in this in-law's house were a series of hardships. Sandy berated me, my husband cheated on me, and on the day I was leaving, no one was there to say goodbye. I was the one who should have been sending them off, not the other way around. Early in the morning, I saw John and Zaria ready for their honeymoon, and Sandy stood there with a smile. I was in a complicated emotional state, but I politely said, "Thank you for having me," and left. They wouldn't be back for a while, so I had time. However, I didn't have much to pack, so I was done in one day. I contacted my brother and sister, who offered to help me move. "We're on our way," they said, so I messaged John too. "I finished packing sooner than expected, so I'll be leaving. Thank you for everything." He replied instantly. The message came with a picture. John, Sandy, and Zaria, all smiles, were in a group photo. "If you've got time, why don't you clean the house too? We're off to enjoy our honeymoon," it said. That made me burst into tears. What was my marriage, really? I gave up my career for this, only to be treated like a maid and receive no love in return. Getting sent a group honeymoon photo with Zaria was the last straw. I felt so pitiful I started crying loudly. My brother and sister walked right in since I'd left the door open. They were shocked to see me crying so hard. "What happened? What's going on?" they asked, half panicked, comforting me. I showed them the group photo while sobbing about my life so far. My kind-hearted sister, Shell, even started crying and said, "You've had a really hard time, haven't you?" After a good cry, I felt calmer. I apologized for my breakdown and said, "Let's get going." I thought this was my final goodbye to the in-laws' house. But then my sister Patty showed me a photo on her phone. "Look, this wiped her cheating husband by turning all his clothes inside out." The picture Patty showed me was filled with clothes turned inside out. "Gosh, that would be so annoying to deal with," said my brother Lynn. Patty chuckled like a mischievous child. "You should do this, sis. It's not like you're destroying anything, so you can't get sued. Plus, it'll be super annoying for them. This kind of revenge is allowed." I was blown away by Patty's suggestion. Right. I've had it rough enough to warrant a little revenge. Let's flip everything upside down, empty the drawers, line everything on the floor, I proposed, feeling like a kid again. Patty and my brother and sister Shell all chimed in. "Sounds great!" Luckily, we had plenty of time on our hands. Just like building a secret base as kids, we had fun turning everything upside down. During the chaos, Shell mentioned, "I found a bunch of boxes. Let's set up some dominoes." I was more than happy to join in. We lined up boxes from curry roux to medicine, creating a massive domino setup that reached up to the second floor. Patty was busy arranging flipped clothes and socks in a gradient around the room, nodding satisfactorily as if she'd finished a masterpiece. The neatly lined flipped clothes were so beautiful, I couldn't help but exclaim, "That is amazing!" While we were doing all this, my younger brother came in, holding a box of marbles and old toys. "Let's scatter some caltrops," he said. "Like in the movie Home Alone," we exclaimed. We then spread the marbles and toy cars all across the doorway. By the time we were done, my in-laws' house was a total wreck. It was as if we'd dumped out a toy chest, the likes of which I'd never seen. We were a bit tired, but the exhilaration outweighed it all. Feeling accomplished, we took pictures from every angle to commemorate our handiwork. In that dreaded in-laws' house, the only reason we were able to make some positive memories was thanks to my younger brother and my sisters. Not to mention John and his crew, who conveniently went on a ridiculous honeymoon for a long weekend, also contributed. Of course, when John and his gang got back from their honeymoon, we received complaints, but I totally ignored them. John and his family no longer matter to me. Besides, I had just moved to a new place and was busy adjusting and job hunting. I eventually found a new job, and although I occasionally remembered the pain John and Sandy had caused me, those memories faded away after a while. Meeting a kind man at my new job who accepted me as I am and starting a new relationship also helped me escape that painful past. But 3 years after divorcing John, my peaceful days, filled with a rewarding job and the love from this gentle man, were disrupted. A message arrived from John. I had moved on and found love with a man named Gerald, who proclaimed he loved me, Raina, from the moment we met. We got married, had our first child, and were busy with the joys and challenges of parenting. To be honest, I had forgotten all about John. When I left the messy in-laws' house, I was so caught up in my little revenge scheme that I forgot to block John's messages. Curiosity piqued. I opened a message from John and found he had sent me a picture. But it wasn't some happy group shot. The picture showed the in-laws' house, a total disaster zone. Raina, it's hard to believe it's been 3 years since we divorced, the message read. Time flies. My new wife may be young, but she's utterly useless around the house. Fun to laugh with, maybe, but not someone to share a life with. I find myself thinking about you all the time lately. How are you? Are you happy? I pray every night that I can see you again. I burst into laughter reading this message that sounded like a desperate love letter, but managed to hold it in since I'd just put the baby to sleep. The state of the room in the picture was horrendous. You could see John's new wife, Zaria, sprawled among the trash, watching TV. She had put on a lot of weight. Nothing remained of the woman who'd gone on that ridiculous honeymoon. Sitting in the chair up front, Sandy looked extremely thin and frail, a far cry from the energetic bully she used to be. I was torn about whether to reply, but thinking about those days got me so riled up that I decided to have my final revenge and reply. I'm incredibly happy now. My new husband is kind and really loves me, completely different from you. We're blessed with a child, and I'm fully committed to raising her. Your life seems a bit tough, huh? Your new wife has certainly grown, not in a good way, and Sandy looks unwell, almost like a grandma. Oops, sorry, I'm just a person who speaks her mind. My married life with you was horrible. The only fun part was playing pranks when you guys were off on your honeymoon. Don't bother thinking about me anymore. Enjoy your life. Bye. Having sent my fittingly outrageous reply to that outrageous family, I blocked John's messages. So I don't know what happened to John and his crew afterwards. However, years later, when I drove past the old in-laws' house, I noticed that it had been demolished, leaving only empty land. I can't help but think something must have happened. As we drove by the site of the former in-laws' house, Patty started to say, Mommy, Uncle, and Auntie play games here like in Home Alone. But I interrupted her laughing. That's a secret. And so we drove past the remnants of what was once the in-laws' house.
We're going to my parents' house again this year.
James makes the announcement, and I can't help but sigh. We agreed to alternate between our parents' homes, remember? I say it, but the promise we made before getting married has never been kept.
If we go to your parents', it'll be stressful. I want to relax during the New Year's celebration.
James gets grumpy at my resentful look. How about this year you go to your parents alone and Ava and I go to mine? I suggest, but James grimaces.
That's not gonna work. The whole point of going is to be dutiful children. If you're not there, it defeats the purpose.
You mean you need a housekeeper, don't you? I swallow those words. I don't want to create a hostile atmosphere in front of Ava. I'm Sophia, a working mom married to James for 4 years. We have a 3-year-old daughter named Ava. She's a late talker, but she's so adorable, I can't help but love her. Whenever we visit my in-laws, I'm the one stuck doing all the housework. James is usually out with his friends, so he's not around to help. To make matters worse, Emma's family, who live in the same city as my in-laws, always seem to visit at the same time as us. Even though they live nearby, they stay overnight, probably to dump the housework and childcare on me. Emma got married young and has 4 kids, all boys. The older 2 are in elementary school, and the younger ones are in daycare and still a baby. Neither Emma nor Angela lift a finger when I'm around, so I'm running around all day doing chores. Why do I have to sacrifice my time so everyone else can enjoy their New Year celebration? I've actually been thinking about divorcing James, and I've got everything ready. The tipping point was a summer vacation 2 years ago. James left in the afternoon and didn't come back until late at night. Worried, I muttered, "I wonder what happened." A tipsy Emma let it slip. "He probably fell asleep. He's at Sarah's place, so he's fine." "Who's Sarah?" Emma reluctantly confessed after I pressed her. According to her, Sarah is an old high school girlfriend, but they're just friends now. But to me, that doesn't sound like a just friends situation. At the time, our daughter was only 1, and the thought of becoming a single mom was daunting, so I hesitated to take the divorce step. But every time we visit my in-laws and James goes out with friends, I can't stand it anymore. I hired a private investigator and gathered evidence of his infidelity. I've consulted a lawyer with the evidence and explained the situation to my parents, planning to move closer to them after the divorce. I've been diligently preparing, looking for a new place to live, job opportunities, and childcare for Ava. This visit to my in-laws will probably be the last. That's what I was thinking as we arrived. On the day of returning home, due to work, we got there on the 31st. The highways were jammed, and as soon as we arrived, Angela said, "Could you make lunch right away?" Right now? I was still holding our travel bags, frozen in place. "Just make something simple. We've been waiting." Angela said that and promptly returned to the living room. I was prepared for this, but it still makes me mad. I put our bags in a corner of the living room, flipped a switch on a device, and put on my apron. I should have turned it on sooner, I thought. I quickly prepared a variety of dishes, and just as I was about to sit down to eat, Emma took my plate away. "I'm breastfeeding, so I need to eat a lot. I'll take Sophia's portion too." Before I knew it, all the food I'd prepared was gone. But that was my portion. When people are too shocked, words often fail them. I could barely muster a complaint. Then James, who had finished eating, said, "Sophia, it's fine to skip a meal once in a while," siding with Emma. Emma quickly started eating my portion and said, "Exactly. Oh, the baby's crying. Can you hold him?" She pointed at the baby while chewing her food. Angela urged, "Come on, Sophia, hold the baby." My in-laws were watching TV while sipping coffee, and James was lounging around. I hadn't sat down since we arrived. As I was walking around holding the fussy, sleepy baby, David yelled, "I can't hear the TV. Take the baby outside until he falls asleep." Once the baby finally fell asleep, Angela called me to wash the dishes and then go shopping. The catch is, we have to pay for everything. They even request high-end ingredients and pantry staples. No one cares that I haven't eaten, and with all these adults around, no one helps clean up. I've been treated more and more like a housekeeper each year, and I couldn't help but give a dry laugh. That's when Emma dropped a bombshell. "Great, we've eaten, so we're going to the countdown. Take care of the 4 kids, will ya? As Emma was about to head out, I hurriedly stopped her. Wait, you mean the New Year's countdown? You're leaving now? It was just past 2 p.m. Yeah, the venue is a bit far, and we don't want to lose a parking spot. Maddie's already waiting in the car. Plus, we don't want the kids to find out. No wonder Maddie, who had been fiddling with his phone, was gone. Emma and her husband want to go out without the kids. I have to go shopping. Please wait until I get back. The moms are here, so it's fine. Just when I thought it might be okay, Angela said something outrageous. Oh, David and I are invited to a neighbor's place. David already left and I'm leaving soon. So, Sophia, please do a thorough cleaning before we get back. Even my in-laws were leaving. Stunned, I didn't know what to say, but Emma suggested, why don't you take the kids shopping? I was shocked and replied, my car can't fit 5 kids. We don't even have enough car seats. Just have the older ones hold the younger ones. That's what we always do. What? I realized their car is also a 5-seater. Could it be they don't use car seats? I was too scared to ask. Or you could leave the baby since he's asleep. If you hurry, it'll be fine. I can't leave a baby alone. I have multiple stops to make. As I insisted, Angela became furious. Come on, Sophia, stop complaining. Emma is usually tired from taking care of the kids. Let her relax for once. Then Angela, please stay and watch the kids. I can't. I've already made plans with the neighbors, and my knee hurts, so I can't take care of the kids. Even when I push back, Angela easily deflects. Then James steps in, wearing a coat as if he's going somewhere.
Hey, Emma asked you, Sophia, for a favor.
But it's impossible, James. Can you at least watch them while I go shopping?
I'm going with them, so I can't.
My mind went blank at James's words. What? Was it decided from the start that the 3 of you are going? What about Ava and me? And Emma's kids? As I fire off questions, James gets annoyed.
Stop nagging. Just do the housework, Sophia. That's what a daughter-in-law is supposed to do.
I'm about to explode with anger. Maybe I've been too patient all this time. Just as I'm about to yell, Emma's kids Michael and Thomas come in. Are the moms going somewhere? We want to go too. It's not fair. Let's all go. They must have figured out their parents are going somewhere and started making a fuss. Good, keep it up, I muttered to myself. The kids are saying this too. Why don't we all go? As I say this with a smile, James and the others exchange glances. But we're going to drink, and kids will be in the way.
Sometimes it's good to have adults only, right?
Emma and James try to calm the situation, but the kids aren't backing down. No way! It's not fair for just the adults. If James is going, then it's fine. The kids are making so much noise that James slips up in frustration.
No, it's supposed to be a double date.
A date? I couldn't help but ask. Wait, you idiot! Emma hurriedly smacks James on the head, but it's too late. A double date? I'm James's wife, you know. Who is James's date? Is it that Sarah person? My voice drops and the room falls silent. Even the kids go quiet, perhaps shocked.
So what? I can have female friends. Are you saying you won't allow me to have friends of the opposite sex now that we're married?
James becomes defiant. Don't change the subject. Emma, you knew about this, didn't you? Angela, did you know? As I ask in a low voice, Angela and Emma exchange glances. Angela murmured, I found out. Because, Sophia, I heard from James that he can't come back here because he can't have a successor, and she's against living together with him. In that case, wouldn't it be better to remarry someone you know from the local area? She continues, so you're all condoning his affair? For the record, it's James who doesn't want to move back because it's more convenient in the city. Don't blame me. James only says what's convenient for him. Something inside me snaps. The kids quietly slip away, leaving Angela, Emma, James, and me. I was about to spill everything when Angela clasps her hand, signaling the end of the discussion. Let's stop this. It's New Year's. Let's enjoy it as planned. Angela says this and leaves with Emma. Sophia, let's just drop it, okay? I'm really looking forward to the countdown event and want to get going. Emma tries to leave as if nothing happened. I won't let her. Emma, either take the kids with you or cancel your plans. I absolutely can't and won't take care of them. I make myself clear. Angela bursts into anger. What are you saying? You and Emma are different. You're just a daughter-in-law, while Emma is blood family. Let her enjoy the New Year celebration. So the truth comes out. I suspected this was how they saw me, but hearing it directly is something else. So you're saying I'm an outsider? Of course, you're just a daughter-in-law. You're not family. Angela repeats herself when I ask for clarification. Then I'll go to my parents' house. If Angela is a stranger to me, then Emma is too. I can't take responsibility for someone else's kids. Angela is at a loss for words. Caught off guard, she can't say anything.
Hey, Sophia, what are you saying to Mom?
James yells, but it's so off the mark, it's infuriating. James, aren't you bothered by what Mom said? She called me an outsider.
Well, you are a daughter-in-law.
Unbelievable. What about Ava?
Ava's my daughter, my blood family.
So, even though Ava is your blood family, and I'm her mother, I'm not family? What am I then, your housekeeper?
Hey, watch your language.
No, I hit the nail on the head. But your housekeeper is resigning. I'm filing for divorce. And I'll be seeking alimony from both you and your affair partner, Sarah. Saying the word divorce feels liberating. James is shocked, yelling,
Why divorce all of a sudden?
Emma adds, Don't talk about divorce over something like this. It's New Year's Eve. Stop joking. Angela doesn't seem to think I'm serious. Just then, Ava comes in and quietly says, Let's go, Mom. She tries to pull me outside. She was quietly playing in the living room earlier, but it seems she's worried about me after hearing our argument. That settles it for me. I pick up Ava. Let's go to Mommy's house. Ava hugs me tightly. Fortunately, our bags are still unpacked, sitting in a corner of the living room. I grab one. Wait, if you don't watch the kids, we can't go to the countdown event. We were really looking forward to it. Emma is still pushing her agenda, and I can't help but laugh. I'm a stranger, remember? I'm going back to my family now. But that's inconvenient for me. We've already booked expensive seats for the event thinking you'd watch the kids. It's too late to cancel now. If you're going to divorce, do it after the New Year celebration.
Emma, are you saying the event is more important than my divorce?
James looks dumbfounded, which I find oddly amusing. James, take the train back. I drop that line and grab the car keys. We'll discuss the details of the divorce through lawyers. Oh, and by the way, I've recorded our entire conversation. I pull out a voice recorder from my pocket to show them. Family-wide cheating and emotional abuse? This will make excellent evidence. I say with a grin. What? What do you mean, recording? Emma, Angela, and James look stunned. Their faces blank. Before the New Year's countdown, the countdown to divorce was already ticking. I think I had the best smile ever. Leaving behind my in-laws, who had turned pale upon grasping the situation, Ava and I get into the car. I hear a chorus of apologies and curses behind me, but they quickly fade away. After driving for a while, I pull over at a convenience store and call my parents. They're shocked by the sudden news, but furious with my in-laws once they hear the story. "Come right away," they say. What happened next? James and I got divorced. I had prepared well, so it was straightforward. I planned to get custody of Ava, and James quickly agreed. He probably planned to remarry his affair partner. However, she dumped him, saying she didn't want to be treated like a housekeeper in his home. She knew how I had been treated for years, and, coupled with the alimony I claimed, probably wanted to cut ties. After that day, it seems the neighbors heard Angela, Emma, and James yelling, and started rumors that it was a terrible household for a daughter-in-law. James called me, begging to get back together, but I flatly refused. Serves him right. Angela, meanwhile, ended up with a slip disc after Emma begged her to take care of the kids in my absence. David had to do household chores he's not good at, making the atmosphere at home tense. Emma and her husband got caught by the police for not having their children in car seats. It was right after the countdown event, and they were under the influence, making matters worse. The neighborhood is buzzing with stories about the family's mistreatment of me and Emma's run-in with the law, making life uncomfortable for my former in-laws. All their own doing. As for me, life after divorce is going smoothly, partly because I had prepared in advance. I was worried about the impact of the divorce on Ava, but we're enjoying calmer days than I expected. Ava is smiling and talking more than before. Everything is moving in a positive direction, and I'm relieved. I want to protect Ava's smiles and spend each day doing just that.